All right, so migrants being sent to Guantanamo. You're hearing about that, right? It sounds like, I don't know, something from way back when, doesn't it?
Yeah, like a history lesson or something.
But it's happening right now. And get this, it's not just people trying to, like, get into the U.S.
Right.
This is about sending people who are already here to Guantanamo. That's, we've never seen anything like this.
No, this is unprecedented. And it's really significant, I think, because you have so many complex issues kind of converging all at once. You know, you've got immigration policy, you've got legal precedent, you've got international relations all kind of tangled up in this.
Right.
So it really does feel like a potential turning point.
Huge.
With a lot of unknowns.
Definitely a big deal. So to help us all wrap our heads around this, we've gathered a bunch of sources, you know, news articles, legal analyses. We've got some historical background on this. And we're going to kind of pull out the most important pieces for you.
Yeah, we really want to paint a clear picture for you of what's actually happening on the ground, why it matters, and what questions this raises about the future.
Yeah.
Because it really does have these long-term implications.
Okay, so let's get into some specifics. We're talking about 10 suspected members of this Venezuelan gang, Tren de Aragua. They were flown from Texas to Guantanamo on February 4th.
Yeah.
Escorted onto a military plane in those gray tracksuits. You've probably seen pictures.
Yeah, those images have been circulating pretty widely. The Department of Homeland Security has labeled them as high threat.
Okay.
And the plan, based on President Trump's executive order, is to expand the facility to hold, get this, as many as 30,000 migrants.
Wow.
They've even used the phrase Guantanamo will hold the worst of the worst.
So this isn't just a small thing.
No, not at all. I mean, Guantanamo already has, like, a small Migrant Operations Center, which they mostly use for migrants that they've picked up at sea.
Right.
But what Trump's proposing is, like, a massive expansion.
Right.
I mean, we're talking about creating a detention facility on a scale unlike anything we've ever seen before.
And this isn't the same high-security prison where they hold terrorism suspects.
No. Correct. It's a separate facility.
Okay.
But even so, the idea of housing such a large migrant population alongside those facilities is raising a lot of ethical and logistical questions. I mean, just think about it for a second. Guantanamo has historically held far fewer people.
Yeah.
I mean, we're talking just 779 detainees have been there since 2002.
Right.
And now we're talking about potentially tens of thousands of beds for migrants.
Wow. Yeah.
It's a massive, massive jump.
Huge shift. Yeah. And this plan is generating some serious pushback, especially from legal experts like Harold Hongju Ko. Now, he's been involved in these Guantanamo legal battles since the 1990s.
He has.
And sees this as part of a pattern of these kind of short-sighted policies. He called the plan unprecedented, delusional, and punitive, even going so far as to say it is a mirage, but it's also insane.
Yeah, pretty strong words.
What makes him so concerned about this?
Well, you know, he's been in the trenches on this issue. I mean, he's seen firsthand how these situations can go wrong.
Right.
You know, and what the unintended consequences can be. And so what he's getting at is that this plan, at least from his perspective, seems more about optics than actual workable solutions.
And you know what makes this so legally precarious is, well, some people are pointing to the Haitian migrants that were held at Guantanamo in the 1990s as precedent.
Right.
So is that a fair comparison?
Well, it is an important distinction to make because those Haitian migrants were intercepted at sea. Oh. They never actually entered the U.S. legally, so that gave them a different legal standing than migrants who were already within U.S. borders.
So it's a different situation.
Yeah. So in this case, you have people who have been living in the U.S.,
right.
Some of them even legally, and now they're being sent to Guantanamo. And Ko argues that this raises serious due process concerns.
Okay. So break it down a little. Due process, you're saying the government can't just, like, bypass the legal protections for these people.
Exactly. And the Supreme Court has actually weighed in on this and ruled that you can't just move people around geographically in order to strip them of their rights.
So it gets really interesting here, because if they're going to have these legal rights anyway, why not just detain them within the U.S.?
Yeah.
Sending them to Guantanamo seems like a really strange, like, strategy from a legal perspective.
You've hit on, I think, one of the key questions here. What is the real motivation behind this plan?
Yeah.
If it's not legally sound, what's driving this?
Yeah.
Is this a deterrent? Is it a political maneuver? What's really going on here?
And then there's the logistical challenges.
Oh, absolutely.
We're talking about, Guantanamo was originally built as a coaling station.
Right.
It wasn't built to be a detention center.
Right.
So how are they going to handle this kind of influx?
Well, Coe is actually, he's painted a pretty stark picture of the conditions there at Guantanamo. He describes the water is bad, hospital facilities are insufficient, it's a desert environment, and to put people into tents is extremely unsafe as a public health matter.
Wow.
So, yeah.
And to be a little more specific, what makes the water situation so bad?
Well, for one thing, the water supply at Guantanamo relies heavily on these aging desalination plants. And these plants are known to be prone to breakdowns and things like that. So just providing clean drinking water to a population that size would be a huge challenge.
Right.
Not to mention adequate sanitation, health care.
Right.
I mean, you're really getting to some serious issues there.
And then there's the cost, which is already astronomical. We're talking about $1 million per day per person to hold someone at Guantanamo.
Yeah.
Making it the most expensive prison camp in the world.
It's an incredible amount of money.
Yeah. So how is this going to be funded, especially when you consider all the other expensive immigration enforcement activities that are already happening?
Right.
Border control,
Right.
potential raids on sanctuary cities, mass deportations. It's a lot.
$1 million a day per person. It's staggering.
Yeah.
And it begs the question, what does this say about the priorities here?
Yeah.
Where is that money going to come from?
Right.
And these are, huge questions that haven't really been addressed.
Yeah. What about the military personnel stationed at Guantanamo?
Yeah.
I mean, managing a huge migrant population, that's not what they signed up for.
Right.
And it seems like it could really strain resources and morale.
It's definitely a valid concern. And, all of this kind of feeds into this larger narrative that we're seeing. Is this plan really about addressing the problem?
Yeah.
Or is it about something else?
Right.
Is it about spectacle? Is it about stoking fear?
Yeah.
Is it more about optics than substance?
Mm-hmm.
Those are questions that we need to grapple with.
Yeah, Coe put it pretty bluntly when he said, "Don't be surprised if Trump claims that he got some kind of symbolic victory out of it, and that maybe nobody will look behind to see that the emperor has no clothes." Oh, so he's saying this plan might be more about appearances than actual solutions.
That's one way to interpret it, yeah.
Huh.
It's a move that's designed to project a certain image, but when you actually start to look at the practical realities, it begins to fall apart.
So we've got this plan with shaky legal ground, logistical hurdles galore, and a mind-blowing price tag.
Yeah, a lot to unpack here.
What else should we consider as we, dive deeper into this situation? So we've talked about the impact this would have on the migrants and the military personnel, but what about the international implications?
Right. What kind of message does this send to the rest of the world?
Yeah, if the U.S. is doing this, what's to stop other countries from following suit?
It's a valid concern. I mean, we've already seen some criticism from the Cuban government who they called this an act of brutality. And, Coe brought up a really thought-provoking point when he said, what do we say when Putin creates an offshore prison camp to hold the next generation of his opponents?
Oh, wow.
And then the Chinese decide to create a prison camp to hold Uyghurs from Xinjiang.
That's chilling.
Yeah, it's a disturbing thought.
Are we opening a Pandora's box here?
Yeah, it feels like a slippery slope, right?
Yeah.
If we as a nation kind of condone this kind of behavior, it really undermines our moral authority on the world stage.
Makes sense.
It sends this message that, human rights are negotiable.
Right.
That due process can be circumvented if it's politically expedient, so.
Yeah, that's a dangerous precedent.
It really is.
Especially in today's world. I mean, everything's so interconnected.
Yeah.
We can't just ignore the ripple effects of our actions.
We're all connected. We can't just pretend that what we do over here doesn't have an impact over there.
And let's not forget, the history of Guantanamo. Yeah. I mean, it's...
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's become synonymous with human rights abuses and legal gray areas.
Right.
It's a symbol of indefinite detention, of justice delayed and denied.
Yeah.
So repurposing it for this kind of mass detention, even if it's labeled as temporary, I mean, it just solidifies that image.
You can't just You can't just rebrand it. It's like, I don't know, it's like trying to rebrand a toxic waste dump as a public park. It's like no matter how much you try to spin it, that underlying reality is still there.
And that underlying reality is that Guantanamo Bay is not and never has been a suitable place for long-term detention of any kind.
Yeah.
Whether we're talking about terrorism suspects or migrants, I mean, the fundamental issues remain the same.
Inadequate facilities.
Logistical challenges.
Astronomical costs.
Serious legal and ethical concern. I mean, they're all still there.
So what does this all mean for, like, the future? Is this plan actually going to happen? Or is this just a political stunt, you know, to, like, create a spectacle and appeal to a certain base?
Well, Coe seems to think that the Trump administration will eventually, you know, quietly slow it down and stop doing it because of all the challenges involved.
Oh.
His argument is that, you know, Trump doesn't really make long-range plans, and he tends to abandon policies when faced with concerted opposition. However, he also warns that, you know, Trump might still try to claim some kind of symbolic victory, even if the plan never comes to fruition.
So is this like a all bark and no bite situation?
Possibly, yeah.
Yeah.
But I think even if the plan ultimately fails, the fact that it was even considered raises some serious questions about where we're headed with immigration policy in this country.
That's a sobering thought. It definitely underscores the importance of staying informed and engaged with these issues. Like, we can't just sit back and assume things will work themselves out.
We can't be complacent. You know, we have to hold our elected officials accountable.
Yeah.
We need to demand policies that are both effective and ethical.
Right.
You know, we have to challenge misinformation and fear-mongering.
Yeah.
And we have to stand up for the rights of all people, regardless of their immigration status.
This deep dive has been, I mean, it's been really illuminating, but it's also left me feeling kind of overwhelmed, to be honest.
Yeah, it's a lot to take in.
It is. What's like one key takeaway that you hope, you know, our listener walks away with?
I think the most important thing to remember is that this situation is far from over.
Okay.
I mean, it's still unfolding, and there are a lot of legal challenges, logistical hurdles to overcome. But beyond just the immediate news cycle, there are broader implications for human rights, international relations, and the very soul of our nation, you know?
Yeah.
So it's really a call to action. It's a reminder that we all have a role to play in shaping the future that we want to see.
We can't be complacent. The stakes are just too high.
Well said. And remember, this is just the beginning of the conversation. We've only scratched the surface here. What stands out to you about this situation? What questions does it raise for you? Keep digging, keep questioning, and keep the conversation going.
It's easy to get, like, caught up in the headlines and stuff.
Yeah, the day-to-day.
But this Guantanamo thing, it really makes you think about the long game here.
Absolutely, yeah. The long-term consequences, the precedent it sets. I mean, if the U.S. can just move people around this way, potentially sidestepping, you know, legal protections and things like that, what kind of message does that send to other countries?
Especially, you know, those with less than stellar human rights records.
Right, exactly.
Makes you wonder if this could embolden certain leaders to, you know, justify their own actions.
Absolutely. I mean, that's the danger of eroding these international norms, right? If we start chipping away at these principles, it becomes much harder to hold other countries accountable for similar actions.
And it seems like this could really backfire on, like, U.S. foreign policy.
Oh, for sure. It definitely complicates things. I mean, how can the U.S. effectively advocate for human rights and the rule of law abroad when we're taking these kinds of actions at home?
Yeah, it's a contradiction.
It creates a dissonance.
What about the impact on, like, future migration patterns?
Right. How will this affect things going forward?
Yeah. Could this actually make things worse?
It's definitely possible. I mean, if people see the U.S. resorting to these kinds of measures, it could deter them from seeking asylum or even legal entry altogether.
Yeah.
And that could actually push people into more dangerous and desperate situations.
So this isn't just about what's happening at Guantanamo right now.
No.
It's about, like, the ripple effects that we could be feeling for years to come.
For years. For decades even, potentially.
It's a big deal.
Yeah, this is a moment where we need to be asking some really tough questions as a nation.
Yeah.
What are our values? What kind of future do we want to build?
Yeah.
And are our actions, you know, aligning with those aspirations?
It's a good point. It's something we all need to be thinking about.
We can't just sit back and let things unfold.
No, we have to be informed and engaged.
Absolutely. We need to stay informed, stay engaged, and speak up when we see something that's not right.
We can't be passive.
Exactly. Our voices matter. Our actions can make a difference.
This deep dive has been, well, eye-opening, but it's a little unsettling.
It is. It's heavy stuff.
But I think it's important to have these conversations.
We have to talk about these things.
Even when they're tough.
Even when they're uncomfortable. Because the more we understand the complexities of these issues,
right,
the better equipped we'll be to, to navigate them.
And to find solutions.
And to advocate for just and humane solutions. Yeah.
So to our listener, we encourage you to keep digging, keep questioning, keep the conversation going. What stands out to you about this situation? What concerns you? What questions do you have? Let's keep learning and discussing together.
Absolutely. This is an ongoing conversation, and we need your voice to be a part of it.